listen. Listen, but listen to hear. There was Frodo, and then Boom Boom was a seal. Lachdan.
Nice. If you had to compare dog training to dolphin training, what's the main difference?
The outcome, what you want to achieve. I mean, my dog must sleep in my bed with me at night. I don't think it will work with the dolphin. The fact that positive reinforcement training started in an industry where you couldn't put a choke chain on an animal. My horse, who's been trained in a gentle way, is more a lawnmower than somebody I ride.
Hello everybody, my name is Tomáš Muzard and welcome to the next episode of our podcast Do Not Bark at Your Dog. Today it's my great pleasure to welcome Gabby Harris, one of the most famous animal trainers in the world. Gabby, welcome and thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview.
It's an absolute honor, thank you.
Gabby, can you think of an animal that taught you the most?
That's a huge question. I don't think one animal's taught me the most. I think when I've been ready to learn, it's, I don't know, goodness. Everything from a cockroach to an elephant, perhaps, or a dolphin to a whale, to a wild animal to let me try and think. The animal that in my life that has taught me the most, I tell you one, is Frodo, the dolphin that I work with. So I've worked with her now for over 30 years. She's over 50 years old. And yeah, I've written about her in my book. So if you've read my books, you would have read about the story where she embarrassed me when she did absolutely nothing when I was trying to show off to a boyfriend.
I did read it, but it was pretty long ago, to be honest, so I don't really remember it.
But that was just a minor lesson relative to the big lessons. I mean, she's the first dolphin or the first animal that I worked with where I taught her to say no. And probably the best training session I've ever had in my life was the first time she said, no, thank you, I don't want to do that. So I think in terms of, there's more than just training when you're working with an animal. There's connection, there's relationship. So yes, you take those for granted or maybe I've taken them for granted with my dogs or cats or anything at home. But in a relationship where I'm meant to be working with an animal professionally, it wasn't possible without having that relationship. So truly being invested in the ethical communication, the real nitty-gritty of who you are and who I am at this present moment. She's been the one over and over and over again. Like if I go there and I'm in a bad mood, she'll show me, even if it's because she's going to try and snap at me or something. Or if I'm going there because I'm needy, she won't be there. But if I'm going there to be present, she will be there. If we can just relate and be together, she's given me personal accountability in my relationship with animals, conscious personal accountability. So perhaps, yes.
Cool.
She's definitely the biggest, most beautiful teacher.
Why can it come up in handy to teach an animal to say no?
Because then you're having a real conversation. Without it, I was taught how to train in a very classical way where the animal must do this and then that will be the result. By the time I was taught how to train animals, I'd studied psychology, so I understood all the psychological terms and how to fit them all together. But I'd been in relationship with animals from the time I was born, and none of that psychology really consciously existed. So it was interesting to have that psychology added to it and to start to realize what I was doing, which almost gave me more tools to develop improved and more effective training. But it didn't necessarily give me tools to improve communication. So when we stumbled upon the concept of teach her to say no if she doesn't want to, I can't tell you that feeling when she said no for that first time. It was the biggest moments I think in my communication history, not only with animals but with everybody, because it was total respect for the fact that you have a boundary and you are able to communicate with me for whatever the reason. So opening the door to true relationship.
That was actually one of my next questions. Well, if you can remember of some moments where you were completely speechless and super present and at the moment. Was this one of the...
That was definitely one of the moments. There have been several, though, not always with animal training. I remember one releasing an elephant seal that we had rehabilitated back into the sea, and we released her from the beach. She had a stillborn pup and had a short rehabilitation period with us, and as she went out, they kind of like wiggle along like a worm. She kept looking back, and it was almost as though she was saying, "Thanks very much, thank you." And it felt that way, I was pretty tearful. So that would have been one out of a session. I find, I don't know if I'm just getting old and emotional, but I find that relationships with animals now, like I feel so much gratitude when I'm in a training session now. Whereas in the past, I think I was very task-minded. So it happens more and more, as you become more respectful of a soul in front of you.
So it's becoming like normal thing for you to feel very
grateful.
Blessed and grateful.
Yeah. Rather than trying to take something from the situation, you're being in relationship.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Can you think of the first animal that you have ever trained? Mm-hmm. And I mean like you doing some kind of signal and the animal answering with some behavior.
So I did read that question that you sent to me this morning, and that's when I went, oh God, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole because I don't know how to answer this. Because I can tell you a moment like that. So that was actually working with a baby dolphin called Jula, where he wasn't eating fish, but he was with Frodo, the supermaster trainer, teacher of me. And I was teaching him to exhale, which is from their blowhole on top of their head. As I said, he wasn't eating fish. He was just participating. He was still suckling milk from his mother. So he was just participating for the interaction's sake. But he understood the bridge, which we use a whistle, and he understood that the tactile, which at that point was what I was using to reinforce him, because I'd spent hours stroking him as he was like developing. And he exhaled, and the first thing for me was to like just have my hand over the blowhole area, which would have been the cue to exhale eventually, and scan the behavior. So wait for him to just breathe and then bridge. And when I bridged, he almost like looked a bit confused. And then the second time, the same thing happened again. And then the third time, he started to blow out slowly, so there was that communication. So that's a memory of a behavior where I really enjoyed the interaction. I remember learning how to train before then, though, where other people were watching me, and I was very excited about the fact that they were celebrating my successes. But it wasn't the same as relating with Jula in that particular moment. But then, here goes the rabbit hole. I remember working with my dog when I was 4 years old and having those conversations before I was taught the psychology of it. So the dog's not allowed to sleep in bed with me, but he's going to. But he hears my father come down the passage. We hear my father coming down the passage, and that wasn't allowed in those days. So we would quickly say, quickly jump under the bed, hide there. And he would hide. I'd say goodnight to my father. The door would close, and he would go out, and Whiskey, the dog, would jump back on the bed, So that's maybe the first interaction of training.
Yeah, I was hoping for a story like that too. And do you remember the first time you did some kind of water work with some of the marine mammals? and maybe for our listeners, the water work means you're training animals in the water.
The first time I got in the water with dolphins at work was also with a mother and a calf at the time. And we needed to clean the bottom of the pool now. So I was probably a week into the job, and we hadn't had a swim test, which should probably be a good idea in today's compliant age, to do the swim test first. I think the pool was about 3 or 4 meters deep, and it was a maternity pool, and the calf was starting to mouth the food, so we didn't want him to pick up any food that would make him ill. So we needed to make sure the food was of good quality. And one of the seniors said to me, please, can you just jump in and dive all that fish out? And I thought, oh God, I've never gone under the water and held my breath, but like, this is my job now. I've got to do this. So I just jumped in and did it. And the mother was racing around excitedly, and the calf was checking me out. And I thought I was going to die, but it was the most exciting thing I'd ever done. And I managed to do it without dying or drowning, which was tick in today's age. But then, after that, swimming with those animals, you need to realize that dolphins are not like smiley, happy animals, even though they're depicted that way. They are natural predators. And every time you get in the water, you can die. Just like a dog can bite you, a dolphin can hurt you. So the absolute surrender of getting in the water and going, you can do whatever you like, let's just do this together. And having that absolute trust that everything's going to be okay. Julia, the dolphin that I spoke of, we had many moments like that.
In your opinion, what's the most interesting animal you have ever trained?
Trained or spoken with?
So there's a difference?
No, exactly. There isn't. So when I go to brush my teeth and the mayflies are in the way and I ask them to move.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe you don't mean that. I don't think that there's one more interesting one than another. I think that there's, when things become interesting is when there's true communication. When I'm really present and I'm able to see rather than try and work it out in my head, or when I'm able to feel what's going on rather than try and work it out in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that answer. But can you think of any tricky cases that you had to deal with in your career that like comes up to your mind? Okay, this was pretty tricky. I had to come up with different solutions.
There's so many. What kind of tricky are you looking for? Are you looking for like problem solving or?
I guess problem solving, but I meant more something like you were trying to approach the training in some way, and then you had to completely change the strategy and maybe try a different way. Or when the animal surprised you quite a lot.
Yeah. What I find really interesting is in times where I've maybe been consulting and I'm having to work with the animal and a person and trying to generate that communication. So I'll give you a horse training example. Working on with the South African police who have horses, and we had our objective was to teach them to train in a gentle way, so to create relationship rather than break the horse, which was the traditional method of jumping on their backs. And I mean, they have a breeding farm, and they'll bring the horses in. That was how they used to do it: bring the horses in and herd them in, so that they could have someone rodeo them into learning how to train. And I remember the one gentleman saying that he loved our way of teaching because he got to fall in love with horses as opposed to just use them as tools. So every individual became important to him. But there was once, which example shall I use? This young lady, she was lovely and she was making such amazing progress and she was so interested and everything was going great. And I think we were on day 3 and we were starting to teach how to move your horse into a horse box, which often the police would have to do. And this lady had made so much beautiful progress in the training. And I was absolutely blown away by, I expected her to be able to lead the horse straight in because the relationship was so good, everything was so positive. And the horse just put on brakes and just wouldn't do anything. And she just seemed completely off. So intuitively, I just said, just go put your horse down, let's go for a walk. And I said to her, what's up? And she just burst into tears. She just had a huge traumatic experience at home and just wasn't in the right space to be with the horse. And it was just so remarkable for me how clear the horse was with her and how it was adding to her anxiety as opposed to doing what it had been taught to do the day before. So it wasn't about the lesson. It was about the relationship. So we just had to spend time getting her and her horse to calm down together, literally co-regulate, get back to where they were the day before. And the horse followed her straight on, like I expected. So moments like that I find remarkable. Then there's been many instances where we've had to design different ways of training behaviors, maybe using new tools. So I spoke on Saturday about cooperative care, where you might need to use a bit for an animal to put its mouth on so that you can get to its teeth easily without worrying about the animal being hurt or, the animal's got an opportunity to move away. I also presented the example at the workshop where my horse, who's been trained in a gentle way, is more a lawnmower than somebody I ride. It's my cuddle pony, one of them. And he had a cut on his flank. Now this horse is actually being medicated every single day. He has eye drops, so I can go up to, without a halter, he will let me put the medication in, and so the training is really good. But when I went to try to touch his flank, he just kept moving away. So I went behind the pole and asked him to come give me a side, and he did it perfectly. And that was a really lovely example of how he needed the choice to get away, because obviously it was tender, in order to feel trusting enough to let me touch him. So he would let me touch him, but as long as I wasn't going to hold on to him with a halter.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned that part of your work is training the trainers, let's say. And I guess at the end that's the same for dog trainers. They have to be partially therapists to the clients, actually. Clients, the people. Mm-hmm. How big of a part of dog training do you think this is?
It's the biggest part. It's the biggest, and I think that the biggest mistake that we make is it makes so much sense. Animal training and building strong relationships makes perfect sense. So when we learn it, we cannot believe that no one else knows it. So I feel like I've caught up now, I know, and this is just common knowledge. So we forget that we actually need to find out where the person is. So we're so eager to watch the animal and work with the animal and fix the animal, although it doesn't need any fixing, that's in inverted commas, that we forget that there's a relationship going on between the person and that animal. So yes, it is the most important thing that we do, and we need to, where is that person? What do they know? Are they a qualified psychoanalyst, or are they a plumber that has a dog that has absolutely no interest in psychology? And sometimes the most exceptional minds also haven't considered relationship and relationship theory. So I've worked with doctors who are blown away by the fact that there's holistic care in psychology, and that's no disrespect to the doctor. It's just another example of the fact that we've learned something that makes so much sense, but we forget that not everybody knows what we know.
Can you think of any other pretty specific idea that you would like everybody in the dog training industry to know? And I don't mean only dog trainers, I mean
animal people.
Yeah, animal people as well.
Or people.
Yeah.
Listen, but listen to hear. I am criticized many, many, many times, still to this day, especially by my husband, about the fact that I interrupt. It's a very, it's a vice on my part, because I feel like I know what you're going to say or what the animal's going to do, and so I'll interrupt without hearing, and that's very disrespectful. And I think as animal people, we usually care so deeply about the animals in our vicinity that we're trying to fix things before we've actually even heard what's going on. Well, I'm speaking for myself now more than anything. So I've found that when I truly listen to hear, number one, usually the situation resolves itself without me having to participate, because I've underestimated the people or the animals around me. Or number two, I get information that's really valuable that will help me to participate in a better way. So yeah, I think it boils down to respectful engagement with another, because we're all on this planet together.
Cool.
Tak, přátelé, právě jste doposlouchali veřejnou část podcastu a jeho zbytek si můžete doposlechnout. Ne, dělám si srandu. Můžete si ho doposlechnout kdekoliv, kde ho zrovna posloucháte, a to zadarmo, a to díky našim skvělým partnerům. Těmi jsou Zvěrokruh, síť prodejen, ve který můžete koupit všechno, co pro svoje čtyřnohý parťáky potřebujete, Generali a jejich pojištění mazlíček, který vám pomůže s nákladama u veterináře, Kong, tradiční klasický výrobce hraček, který všichni známe a milujeme, a Tribal, anglický výrobce vysoce prémiových krmiv. Moc jim děkujeme za podporu a jdem na zbytek rozhovoru.
I'm sure there is a lot of animal enthusiasts in our audience. What would you say are the most interesting countries people can visit to see some amazing animals? And I mean like normal people, not like
the ones that live in
trainers, you know, so sometimes we can get maybe closer to some animals than normal people normally would. So just like if someone wants to go somewhere to see many...
Well, I can only speak from my frame of reference, and I haven't been to many, many places, but every place that I've been to, I usually find animals. I can only speak for home. Like, I'm so blessed to have grown up where I do, where we have access to many spaces where you can experience animals. So, you know, one of the magical things, we had a Shape of Enrichment conference in South Africa quite a few years ago, where there were people from facilities all over the world that came to see African animals in a more natural setting, so in game reserves. And I found the conversations were mind-blowing. So I remember discussing one concern where there was a small antelope in a zoo somewhere, I don't recall where it was, and it always seemed to be trying to hide. And when we looked at the natural history of that animal, it is predated by big birds of prey. And directly opposite, or just directly above that animal's zoo habitat, was a bird of prey habitat. So things like that, you know, we often look at behavior in a very one-dimensional way, particularly when we're trained in psychology, and we forget about the natural history of the animal, or we forget about their needs. We recently presented, for example, on the need to move in different ways. As human beings, there's so much theory about movement, about what kind of fitness is good, or, you know, there's a new phase and now you need to be doing CrossFit, or now like spinning is really good for that, or yoga is now being criticized for this reason. You know, there's always this theory going on. But that's just for one species. The same exists for every single species out there. And when we put animals in human care, like dogs on our couches, or who usually end up living longer, are we actually facilitating their best lives with good physical care? You know, your dog should probably warm up before it runs every single time. But how often does that happen? How often do we just pick up the ball and throw it?
Yeah, that's true, definitely. Me and my wife...
so that was a big rabbit hole after you said where's a good place to go and find animals and to go and see. So yes, I would encourage seeing animals in their natural spaces wherever possible. And that's everything from a mayfly to a cockroach to you know, like we forget about the reptiles and the insects and that's also an ecosystem of amazingness.
Yeah. Sometimes we just want to see the big five and then just forget about.
Yeah. And the big five need the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. There's actually something called Ugly Five. Did you hear about it?
No.
Like when you go for a game drive, that was in, not sure if it was in Kenya or in Botswana where we were. They were telling us we have Big Five and then we have Ugly Five.
Yeah.
I cannot really remember all the animals that are in Ugly Five, but there was definitely hyenas.
Okay.
Some birds of prey.
Vultures, perhaps.
Wild hogs, I think.
Yeah.
And no, I cannot remember about the rest. But I was like, no, I love all of them.
Exactly.
You know,
how can you call them ugly?
Yeah. Like hyenas, they are absolutely amazing. We stayed in one place and then we just watched some hyenas for like 2 hours. My wife was completely bored at the time. And I was like, no, we just have to stay here and watch hyenas.
Watch the natural history of those amazing animals.
So
one more punt just on natural history. My husband is a free diver. And versus scuba diving, which he's also done in his life, he reckons that if you truly want to be in nature, free diving is an incredible thing to do. I mean, he's sent videos of humpback whales swimming out from underneath him, and and then he apparently is very unpopular in his group because he loves the plankton, like the cockroaches, you know, so like he'll be seeing these tiny little animals where everyone else is just looking for the big five out at sea.
Yeah, to be honest, both of these sports scare me quite a lot.
Yeah. The first, I did a scuba diving course years and years ago, and grew up in the Jaws era, where everything beyond the breakers in the sea was going to end up with me in the mouths of a shark.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an incredible experience to get over the hurdles of fear and recognize that there's a whole world under the ocean that is just insanely remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If my research is right, you started working in South African SeaWorld in 1990.
Correct.
How did the animal training look like back then? Was it like way different than today?
Yes. I think it was in its infancy. However, I'm very grateful that I learnt it when I did and have watched it evolve. Karen Pryor obviously was the original dolphin trainer, and I'm sure your audience know of her books, Don't Shoot the Dog being a very popular book. The first animal training book I ever read. I think most of animal trainers say the same. And the fact that positive reinforcement training started in an industry where you couldn't put a choke chain on an animal, but yes, still, in those days, I remember being told when the animal fails, time out, or, we had different whistles that we were taught, like whistle cues. So one of them was, that would be the end of session cue, or a double whistle, like if you blew the whistle twice, meant a recall, or just a single bridge meant well done. Mm-hmm. But people were using them interchangeably. So, for example, you could almost hear the anger in the double bridge when the animal had taken the wrong cue, or that was terrible, I'm going to time you out and give the end of the session cue, which shouldn't be associated in that way, So there wasn't that much finesse in the way that I was taught. But having said that, watching those animals buck the system, if you will, so relating better to more sensitive people and watching and noticing, no, that doesn't work, and eventually banning all the other whistles and just focusing on the bridge because everything else had got a little bit. Oh, there was also a delta where we'd blow the whistle sharply, one little bridge after another, which meant, and I'm leaving, I'm not going to carry on, So there were all these interesting, communication tools. I think that's how they started, but they started to become abused, for want of a better description. And just realizing that it wasn't helpful, it wasn't working, and it wasn't serving to set up positive relations. Noticing that people that used them less were getting better results. So it was, and I'm just speaking about the facility in which I was in, and then started to notice that, like in the dog training industry at that point, positive reinforcement wasn't even being really used. I remember visiting a circus back then, and they were using it with the dogs in the circus. They were actually using treats and things to teach the dogs. And I thought that's interesting based on the fact that circuses have got such a bad reputation, but they'd obviously for their business worked out an easier way to achieve a goal. So I'm really grateful that I've seen the evolution of training and how it's not, I think back in the day it was seen to be a tool to achieve an end. Whereas I think for me, definitely, and for many people I know, training is now an opportunity to communicate so that we can work cooperatively to achieve something, whether it's taking the stitches out of my puppy's paw or achieving a cooperative care medical training session or doing research where I can measure how you feel, all those types of things. We're in a world now where animals are seen as sentient beings, and that's such a relief that we've traveled this journey and we've got here. And then there's, having said all that, that's with no disrespect to, it was the theory that was provided. Behaviorism was the start of that theory, and I don't fully buy into the behaviorism picture anymore because I feel it's quite a manipulative process. It's no longer, the fact that you're only focusing on the behavior that you can see as opposed to the emotional response that the animal might be exhibiting. And I think that we've become better at seeing those emotional responses and responding to them and being more sensitive to animals without giving ourselves away to it, because you can do that and there is the risk of that as well. Yeah. Does that answer the question? I went a little spiral. Yeah.
Is it okay to say back then the training in the sea world might have been more about let's teach them tricks for audience to see, and now it's more towards like the cooperative care and things like this?
No, we were teaching cooperative care back then as well, and we were teaching, like there was even some research going on. I remember doing research with cognitive behavior people back then as well. I think it was literally seen as a tool. You know, if I spoke about my childhood and I was teaching the dog to jump under the bed, or at the age of 11 we had a dog show in our neighborhood where everyone was able to bring their dog, which we organized, you know. So, but there was no treats or anything like that. We were just being with our animals. So it went from like being with animals to understanding that the theory of behavior can achieve goals. You know, so I mean, and then from there we've now fine-tuned it almost to being more welfare-based, more about the animal's well-being. Because we've learned that you can talk to them using behavior principles. So it's, you know, being in Czech, I have to learn to communicate differently because not everyone speaks English. And it makes me maybe more sensitive to people's body posture or that type of thing. And I'm not as sensitive to that when I'm back home. You know, so there's a new skill that you're learning which provides you more opportunity to see things differently. Yeah. You know, you get good zoos and bad zoos and tricks and whatever all over. And I don't think that's changed now. And I don't think it was any different 50 years ago. And I don't think it will be any different in the future because human beings are dark and light and interesting.
Can you remember the first animal you have trained over there in SeaWorld? Frodo?
Yeah.
Frodo was actually the first one?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I thought it would be like, okay, there was a penguin first, or just like it wasn't a dolphin first.
Yeah, so obviously not on my own. I was with more senior trainers. There was Frodo, and then Boom Boom was a seal. Lachdan.
Right.
She was remarkable. Yeah, and they did do that to me. Actually, you are right. I just remember Frodo because who wouldn't? But back in those days, we were asked to train penguins to walk during the presentation from one side to the other. And there was a penguin called Donald who just bit everybody. And they said, you need to teach him to walk. So, yes, Donald was a special dude.
Cool.
He did learn, by the way.
From where you were getting the information about the training mainly? You've mentioned, okay, there was a Karen Pryor, we don't you the dog.
And the days before internet.
Yeah. And they were like more senior trainers.
Yeah.
Was that the main source?
So South Africa is pretty isolated. And we had a curator who had been overseas, so he definitely assisted. And then we had the more senior trainers. I mean, when I started, I had a degree, but I didn't understand animal training, and they taught me that. We had a library, and we were told to read. So any book, whether it was a psychology book or Karen Pryor was the one out there. There weren't many animal training books back in that day either. There was some. We were a part of the International Marine Animal Trainers Association. Not on internet. They used to send a journal out 3 times a year, and those were all backed up in the library. And that was literally my fodder. I ate all those books to kind of learn all about that. There wasn't even email, and we weren't allowed to phone overseas because it was too expensive. But you know what? It improved networking because you would write letters to people and get responses and find out. And I'm almost grateful. You know, now I find my trainers that are starting off now, they don't even have that curiosity because everything is at their fingertips. You know, there's this theory that we don't even have to remember anything anymore because if we forget it, we just Google it. So, I'm grateful that I grew up in that time where multimedia was not there. But then again, I also see there are some people that come through that are that curious, and they will be online and finding out and talking to me, you know. So it might just be the nature of different human beings that, you know, this is their thing. This is what they're going to do or not.
Can you describe for us how a normal day of a dolphin or marine mammals trainer looks like?
It's 24 hours long, so the job never ends. But in animal care, I think that's the same for all of us. You know, your dog's in your bed with you if you're that way, or in the bed next to you. So we have a night shift, and they are trained to monitor animals. At then 5 o'clock in the morning, the shift begins where we start to prep food. Because it needs to be ready by 7. And there's a lot of food that needs to be prepped. And then the sessions will begin. So the sessions will start with observations. So just how are all the animals, who are they, who they're relating to. Then we'll probably have a couple of training sessions in the morning, medical training, probably practicing if the vets are wanting some diagnostics or anything like that. Between that, there will be some enrichment time. And then there will be daily presentations for our guests, because I'm from the South African Association for Marine Biological Research. We're actually over 70 years old, and our objective has always been a sustainable use of our oceans, which is quite interesting when it's only become a buzzword now, but that was noted by some wise people right back then. And obviously marine areas are so much not as explored as terrestrial areas, you know. So I think I'm very proud of the fact that I'm from that organization. But our objective, being non-profit, is to educate people about the importance of marine conservation. So our daily presentations are designed with that in mind, which I think is really important in a third world. We have hundreds of thousands of school children that come through our facilities, and many of them, it'll be the only time that they will see marine animals. So
okay, let's ask this question: how important do you think it is to have dolphins in human care, regarding to how people really feel about these animals, how they feel about oceans, you know, like just so they can see them pretty close, you know. It makes the feeling totally different than if you see it in a TV.
So I think I'm really respectful of anyone that feels that animals should be in the sea. I think we should all feel that. And for me, that is the reason I wrote to Greenpeace when I was, a young teenager, asking for a job because I read a book about activist ships that would go between whalers and the whales, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. As I grew up, I recognized that maybe that wasn't the most effective way to achieve change, because in order to achieve change on our planet, we need to change people's minds. I believe that activism about dolphins is as a result of dolphins being in our facilities. People have noted and been taught about mind in the waters. So I'm really excited about the day that people see that in fish or see that in, like there was recently a movie about a South African movie called My Octopus Teacher, where a man created a relationship with a wild octopus. And now you don't get octopus in the menu in many restaurants because of that movie. So, yes, it's like changing from within, if I can put it that way. At the same time, there's been research done on the emotional connections that animals like dolphins or horses or dogs generate in human beings. And if we are able to generate those connections and demonstrate that this dolphin can't exist without an ecosystem, then we're doing something towards a greater good. Having said that, the lessons that we've learned looking after animals are progressive. We're always learning. As we said earlier, we have a fitness understanding for human beings, but how many species are out there and what do we need to know in order to get it right? So big loaded answers. I don't sit on one side of the fence or other side of the fence. I try to see the ballpark and achieve the best for the animals, number one, and then the greater good. But that makes me sound like I'm special. I do mess up.
Okay, let's go back to the normal day of
So
a dolphin.
So we were talking about the fact that the presentations happen, and I've just justified the reason, even though, and in between that there will be enrichment and time that the animals can just spend on their own.
Sorry, when you mentioned enrichment, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so there's different types of enrichment. So we do have some devices that we've proven are just toys. I don't like the term enrichment, by the way. I find it demeaning of the needs of the animals, because do they only get to have a better life sometimes, or should we be progressive in what we're doing?
I had the same feeling, to be honest, about the polar bears having ice in the Prague Zoo for one day, and there was like a huge event and everybody was crazy about it. That's cool, that's so cool. And I was like,
what about the rest of the time?
Should this be like completely normal, maybe?
Yeah.
And like, I still think it was a great idea, of course, and it's enrichment, but it's the same topic. Like, it was enriching for one day.
Well, yeah, so, and I think that's a. I like to describe enrichment as an experiment to see what needs to be added to that care program.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So
I like that.
In order to experiment, I need to have a baseline. I need to know why I'm providing the intervention. I need to measure the outcome, and then decide if it's worth doing differently or if it's worth adding into the program. Variety is good, novelty is good, all that kind of stuff. But when we do something to pat ourselves on the back by throwing in a toy, then that's not enrichment, that's guilt mitigation.
Mm. Okay, so enrichment parts of a day for dolphins. So after that, what happens?
Yeah.
Or like we can think.
But so between that, a hell of a lot of cleaning, where the keepers are, or the animal care specialists are cleaning around the habitats, which is in itself engaging with the animals. You know, if you've got a broom, you'll probably find a dolphin coming for a rub with the broom, for example. And then making sure that everything to support the animals is also done by the animal care specialist. So stock controls, cleaning, and a lot of cleaning. And then welfare interventions occasionally, you know, so maybe we'll have a discussion about how we want to improve this or a new... So enrichment is either something that has been determined as something we use, or it will be an outcomes-based intervention. So we would like the dolphin to spend more time under the water today. We know how much time it normally spends underwater. We're putting in this device. Does it change the outcome? And then should we be adding this to our program? Yeah. And that will occasionally happen as well.
Okay.
And then the staff also need to meet, and then you also get all the admin, compliance-based stuff and all that drama, which seems to have left-fielded us out of existence at this point in time.
Can you think of one specific behavior that you thought was pretty interesting and you taught it to a dolphin?
I think there's two things that come to mind. I think I've written about the one where we used to provide novel cues that the animals haven't seen before. And I had two dolphins in front of me. I gave them a novel cue, and both of them went off at the same time and did a backflip, even though they had never been taught to train a backflip, at exactly the same time.
Okay.
Like, that was like mind-blowing for me. I don't know how that happened. So, that was a big moment where you were recognizing the communication between the two animals responding to something novel, where they knew they had to go off and do something novel. I mean, like, that's just beautiful. And then the other thing, besides the animals, there's one dolphin, Zulu, who has got a very clear default no, but it's a toy. It's a string of yellow floats. And if that toy is in her habitat, when I go there to start a session, she'll fetch it and bring it to say, we're doing this. And one of the things that she also really seems to thrive on is a creative cue, where I will give her a cue, which means make something up. She has the default, so if she can't think of anything, she can do that. But usually she has a string of different things. And very often she would prefer to engage in those types of things than learning in a traditional way. So we'll use them in a way that will encourage some traditional learning as well.
All right, let's talk a little about dog training specifically as well.
Yes.
I could talk about like animal training.
It's all the same.
Yeah. That's actually the question. Do you see some difference, like pretty important difference, or just like a minor difference between dog training and like other animal species training?
Yes. So the natural history will definitely create some differences. So if you're training a cat, a domestic cat, for example, and I stand to be corrected because I'm not the best cat trainer before. I've trained cats, but it's not something I've spent a lot of time doing. But they seem to be a lot slower and more deliberate. Different types of seals. We have had some rescued sub-Antarctic fur seals, which we've had to teach some things, and Cape fur seals, the local South African animals. And they have completely different ways of learning. So you need to be cognizant of that. Even different dog breeds. You get your border collies, which will be a little bit more out there, focusing on everything. And I had one years ago, and he literally used to learn by watching the others. So he would watch the whole session, then come in, I'd give him the cue, and he'd just do it because he'd worked it out. So that for me is a border collie trainer, because they are having to be herd animals, and so they need to see the big picture. Whereas you'll get your more in-your-face Labradors, for example, who are probably more focused.
More in your face, like literally?
Yeah. And then you've got the different personalities, even within the species, that learn differently based on their reinforcement history as well as their personalities. Some animals learn in way more detail than other animals.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a favorite dog breed to train?
Yes.
Which one?
The rescued ones. No, but there is a breed in South Africa called Africanus, and I have some mixtures of Africanus and who knows what else is in their mix. But they seem to be almost a cross between the border collie and the Labrador in a way, because they've got that big picture potential, but they've also got the ability to have detailed focus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very loyal and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice. If you had to compare dog training to dolphin training, what's the main difference?
The outcome, what you want to achieve. I mean, my dog must sleep in my bed with me at night. I don't think it'll work with a dolphin. Goodness, dolphins are more social as animals. They require each other, and I think that's really important to bear in mind. Dogs are social too, but they can use you as part of as their social network a little bit. Dolphins too, but you can't be there as much as you can with a dog. So that would be the main difference, is that our dogs are living in our homes with us, and their training almost never ends because like it's like having a child. They can't just go and draw on the walls when they want.
One of the hot topics right now in the dog training world, and you have already mentioned this, is cooperative care. It seems maybe like something completely normal for us, for dog trainers, I mean, but it's not really that normal for like dog owners yet. Why do you think it is like that?
Because we're not doing our jobs as dog trainers. No, we are. I think, changing people's minds is as difficult as training, or as easy as training people. And focusing on what works is, as I said right in the beginning, is like we assume that everyone knows what we know because it just seems so absolutely what needs to be done or said. We understand behavior management. We understand that this is in the best interest of the animals. Why does it make so much sense to me and it doesn't make sense to you? Because we're in the industry. We are here, and it's up to us to share that passion with someone that may not be as passionate as we are, that has different needs and different ways of being. So back again to that relationship of respectfully hearing so that I am able to be heard. And also, sadly, recognizing that not everybody's going to buy into what you believe. There's a long standing tradition. Even many vets around the world still do not use behavior in their learning even. Like the vet schools don't. It's usually an elective to do behavior. it's great because I think there's potential for behavior management to work in conjunction with vets, and vets have got enough on their plate anyway. And I definitely am seeing that the trend is changing to behavior being more a part of holistic care. So I think there's hope. Definitely. I mean, I know there's hope. If I've shared with you already the 30 years of change that's occurred in my career. So it's just a matter of time.
Okay.
Yeah, people becoming aware and sensitive about what's required.
There is still a lot of places in dog training world that use more of some kind of aversive tools. And do you follow the debate between force-free trainers and like these, I don't want to say these kind of people, that sounds weird, but more like these two different approaches?
I don't follow the debate, but I do get a sense, once again, that there's a long-standing tradition of this works, so just do it. The bottom line is that if we learn something in a stress state, it's a very powerful way of learning. So it's easy to teach that way. It's a quick fix. And when people, like if you look at the horse training industry, the biggest reason why we have all that equipment on the horse is because people are afraid of failing or whatever. So it's not easy to build confidence in positive reinforcement ways because it takes a little longer. And it requires a bit more patience, and it requires that the person wants to. So I think it's about one step at a time, just like we always say in this industry, yeah. And without creating an argument about it, because, like if I'm trying so hard to be right and tell you that my method is the right way, all I'm doing is providing you a way, something to argue against. So that's the reason I probably don't follow the debate, is I'm more interested in learning more about what I'm doing and doing it better than proving that you're doing it wrong.
Cool. Is there a question you would like somebody to ask you about animal training and you are not normally asked in interviews?
Why do I do what I do?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
why do you do what you do?
I wish I knew. No, I'm absolutely fascinated by the fact that I grew up wanting to talk to animals. My father is a vet. There were animals in our home always. Always wanted to know how they felt, which is probably why the best training session I've ever had was when Frodo said no, because then it felt like the first time I could be Dr. Dolittle and go, oh my God, I can hear you. Yeah.
Cool. So, final question. Was the idea that you'd like everybody to know about dog training or just like living with a dog?
Forgive yourself. When you get it wrong, it's just information. We are very hard on ourselves as animal trainers. We feel like we've got to do it all right, and we can't do it all right. Sometimes we need to make mistakes.
Nice. All right. That was the last question. Gabby, thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview. Thanks a lot.
It's been an honor talking to you and being in Czech Republic again. Thank you.